So, Bryn and Lisa Do True Crime is sponsored by OD Collective and Cook with Lisa.
Yay!
Oriental Drift is a high-quality boutique for men and women that offers a large range of alternative clothing for all ages and sizes, from shirts, jeans, joggers to footwear and sunglasses. Cook with Lisa is a budget ebook by myself and is now available from all ebook stores, including Kobo and Amazon. As brand ambassadors for OD Collective, Bryn and I are proud to offer you, the listeners, a discount code on your entire OD order. Upon checkout, use the code MS Lisa Appleton or Bryn CJ Hammond to receive 10% money off. Check out their latest clothing by visiting www.orientaldrift.com today.
Welcome to another gut-busting episode of So Bryn and Lisa Do Wine and Crime. Ahead of us tonight is the Lutz Family Haunting Episode 2, the climatic conclusion to our 4-part series on the Amityville horror. Our 4-part Amityville series began with the DeFeo murders, and the first 2 episodes focused solely on the DeFeo massacre and its aftermath. Ronald Joseph Butch DeFeo Jr., born on September 26, 1951, was eventually tried and convicted for the killings of his father, mother, 2 brothers and 2 sisters in 1974. The Lutz Family Haunting, which began on the 24th of June and which is concluded this evening, looks at the Lutz's claims, which became a hugely successful book series and film franchise of 9 movies and 1 remake, attentively titled The Amityville Horror. We will also delve into our verdict on whether we believe the property was in fact haunted or it was simply haunted by bad memories and bad karma stemming from Janssen's bestseller The Amityville Horror.
I must admit, Bryn, this has really opened my eyes to how the media can manipulate tragedies such as the murder of the DeFeos to line their own pockets. Who would have ever believed that a murder for life insurance, as it's believed to have been, could turn into a film series with killer lamps, dolls' houses and mirrors?
Not forgetting all the independent standalone movies and books that have come and gone, the last one being Amityville Murders, released by Cinematel last year.
Anyone who missed last Wednesday's episode, which was repeated Saturday at 11 p.m. due to popular demand, will know that we concluded with the introduction of Ed and Lorraine Warren, a husband and wife team of self-proclaimed demonologists, brought into this story by Channel 5 News. The Warrens are probably best known for the Conjuring series.
Thanks to James Wan.
They also ran an occult museum, now closed, in Monroe, Connecticut, called the Warrens, which was later taken over by Tony Spera, Lorraine's son-in-law. The museum displayed many haunted objects and artefacts from around the world. Many of the artefacts began described by one tourist on TripAdvisor as a bunch of tat that was simply gathering dust. The items, housed in cabinets for the safety of its visitors, are allegedly from the Warrens' most famous investigations. They include the parents' music box featured in The Conjuring. Then there's the real-life Annabelle doll, a toy monkey who is reportedly possessed by a demon, and a brick from Barley Rectory, which has been described as the most haunted house in England by psychic researcher Harry Price.
The Warrens, who claim to be the first occult, self-taught and self-professed demonologists, were in fact far from that. During the writing of my ebook, Pyramid of Terror, which takes a historical look at the ancient Egyptians and demonology, out now, I learned that in 1597, King James VI of Scotland published a compendium of witchcraft lore called Demonology. The book was a philosophical dissertation on contemporary necromancy and the historical relationships between the various methods of deviation used from ancient black magic. Much of the Warrens' teachings, including their books, use like-for-like concepts brought to the forefront of the public's imagination by King James. And much like the Warrens borrowing from the 15th century book, they also stole ideas from mainstream media, including the 1963 episode of The Twilight Zone, in which a woman named Annabella gives her daughter a doll that comes to life and terrorises the family. This would later become the demonologist pipeline for their own dolly dearest, Annabella, which they claimed was possessed by a deceased woman named Annabelle Higgins. But one of the most damning pieces of evidence which pointed towards the Warrens possibly being frauds came to light in 1997.
Well, Steve Novella, host of the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast, and Perry De Angelis, the co-founder and executive director of the New England Skeptical Society, investigated the Warrens as part of an academic study. Novella and De Angelis said of the couple that they found them, by all accounts, pleasant people, but their claims of demons and ghosts to be, at best, just tellers of meaningless ghost stories and, at worst, dangerous frauds.
Novella, who is also a neurology specialist, went to the Warrens' occult tour with De Angelis as part of their investigation, and quickly came to the conclusion that the $13 tour was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Besides finding common errors with flashlight photography and nothing evil in the artifacts on display, they also concluded that the couple's investigation were nothing but party tricks. They're not doing good scientific investigation. They have a predominant conclusion which they adhere to literally and religiously, Novella said, adding they claim to have scientific evidence which does indeed prove the existence of ghosts, which sounds like testable claim into which we can sink our investigative teeth into. What we found was a very nice couple, some genuinely sincere people, but absolutely no compelling evidence. Novella's analysis can also be highlighted by Annabella's story. Ed Warren, prior to his death, would warn museum visitors that the last man to mock Annabelle ended up perishing in a motorcycle crash. Ed, when pushed on the story, often refused to provide names or evidence to the tale, forcing visitors to accept the Warrens' urban legend at face value alone.
The Warrens first entered 112 Ocean Avenue on February the 24th, 1976. Lorraine Warren described the experience many years later as an overwhelming sense of sadness. The Warrens also alleged, like the Lutz, before them they had no prior knowledge of Butchie's DeVio's massacre. This would then change depending on who they told. As the investigation got underway, the Warrens entered the basement, which was a heavy focus in the tabloids due to the discovery of the ammunition carriage box, which changed the entire direction of the DeVio massacre investigation. Ed claimed he felt a powerful inhuman presence. He also claimed there was a gush of wind so powerful it could wake the dead. It was if I was standing underneath a waterfall and the pressure was driving me down to the floor, and I commanded in the name of Jesus Christ. What was there to reveal its identity? I understood right at that point that what we were dealing with was no ghost. This was no ordinary haunted house. Their initial investigation allegedly focused on Lorraine's clairvoyant and light trance medium ability. Light trance medium is a very refined aspect of mediumship, which influences spirituality as well as our messages in mediumship. The blending of energy between spirit control and medium is allegedly the strongest form of medium, and a medium can lose awareness. As Lorraine was self-taught, it's unclear what stage she was at, but according to Arthur Findlay College, there are 3 levels. Beginners, where the medium is capable of achieving an altered state of consciousness or subdued consciousness, working with external thought processes and giving spirit voice to a minimum. Light control would be evidence taking inspiration further, achieving a deeper blending. Intermediates, where there is a strong influence of spirit upon the medium's mind, when they are capable of achieving an altered state of consciousness, and onlookers are able to witness the spirit through their clairvoyant vision or by sensing atmospheric changes.
This all sounds so deep, it's crazy.
Yeah. And advanced, which is full spirit control of the medium's mind. The medium will be in a state of mental hold by the spirit in an altered state of consciousness and will have no recollection of proceedings. An altered state of consciousness occurs when the ego is dissolved and there is union or blending with a formless universal energy.
Whatever level Lorraine used to form her beliefs, both Warrens agreed that the home was able to manipulate a weaker and more vulnerable mind, such as Butch, due to the inhuman presence that resided there. Nevertheless, locals who lived in the surrounding town of Babylon retained that 112 wasn't haunted, and the Warrens simply brought the circus to town to line their own pockets. And if anyone was haunted, it was the disturbed minds of Butch, George Lutz, the Warrens, for taking advantage of a true American tragedy. One of the focal points for their later investigation and the book, besides the basement, was the mysterious red room that George Lutz discovered hidden inside a closet that George claims stank of rotten flesh and excrement. The Warrens would later call the room a portal to hell. The said portal to hell, in fact, was nothing more than a cramped crawl space under the basement stairs, portioned off to store the Tefeo children's toys. The room was later renovated and erased from the property's memory to prevent putting off new potential buyers.
Well, what the Warrens did do here, which they failed to do with other investigators, was to put together a team of professional psychics to assist them in their findings. The Channel 5 News team, Marvin Scott, Steve Petrolopoulos and Laura D. Dio, covered the Warrens' investigation on the night of March 6, 1976, where the infamous photo that features what appears to be a young boy with white eyes peeking out the doorway was taken. A friend of the Warrens, Mary Pascarella, travelled along to the house during the March 6 investigation. Mary considers herself a time walker, a person who is able to sense and sometimes visualise past events in a particular location. She said of her time at the property, "When I go any place, I always say, don't tell me anything about the house." And Ed called me one night and said, "I have a case, I'd like you to investigate, and what is your impression?" And I said, "I see a white house with a fan window." And he said, "Okay, don't say anything else and we'll get in the car and go." And when we arrived there, there was a team there and we couldn't go in. And they went up and got pizza and I stayed in the car. Then I walked out to the back of the house because I like to get feelings of things. And when I got into the back, I had heard water. And so I saw a pool and I thought, well, that's it, that's the pool, that's the water. And discharged that. But while I was in the back there, I usually say I'm Catholic and I usually say some prayers before I go into a house. That was my quiet time, and I looked up into the window in the back of the house and I saw the face of a young girl looking back out.
Mary would later say after entering the home she felt specifically uneasy in the basement and the red room chilled her to the very core. When you get into the basement area, there's a laundry room off to your right hand side of the stairs, and then I look to the left and there's a large game room, and the game room had a pool table and family things where the family would enjoy themselves. In front of you there's a little door and it went into a smaller, like cold cellar. I never could really go into that room because it had an odour in it. Now, you have to understand that I was under the impression that the house had nothing there, but I investigated the house to see, because I walked home, to see what possibly could have affected it to cause people to be affected by the house. So we got to the laundry room, had some clothes on the floor. So I'm Mrs. Clean by nature, and I picked up the clothes and I threw them in and washed them, figuring maybe if there's an odour there, it might be the clothing themselves, because it was definitely like a dirty sock smell or something that had been soiled. Mary would later become ill during the first séance in the basement of the property and was ushered out of the room due to the odour that overpowered the group.
Mary said maybe a wet fart of sorts, or at least a fart of soiling, adding I became sick violently. Mary was not the only one who experienced strange events that night. Channel 5 cameraman Steve Petrolopoulos reportedly suffered heart palpitations and shortness of breath while climbing the staircase. The Warrens said they also felt a cold spot on the staircase where Steve broke out in a rash. A detail George Lutz later said he had also experienced while living in the property, along with the stench of dirty socks and or flatulence. Mary also alleged it was in that area of the staircase that she witnessed something inhuman that threatened her life. There seems to be some kind of black shadow that forms ahead and it moves, she said, adding, and as it moves I feel personally threatened. Another psychic, Alberta Riley, made similar claims during the seance. Riley said, it's upstairs in the bedroom. What's here makes your heart speed up. My heart's pounding. Whatever is here is, in my estimation, most definitely of a negative nature. Riley's comments were indeed an accurate analogy. One of the dangers of seances or playing with Ouija boards is that they can open a kind of psychic doorway which allows spirits into your space. The problem is that once you have let them in, it is not so easy to get them to leave. Lutz, on the eve of moving in, began toying with the dark arts and, being a novice, had no knowledge of closing the gateway, allowing whatever was on the other side to remain on our plane. When you play with the Ouija board, multiple ghosts come right away. It happens very fast and they very rarely want to leave. Some spirits also like to play mind games. For example, if you were at a seance and were desperate to speak with your late grandmother, a passing spirit could read your thoughts and start bringing you messages from your grandmother by telling you things that you want to hear. Most people leave seances or Ouija boards sessions with unwanted entities attached to them, which could be one of the explanations for Kathy's comments about the spirit stalking her and her family long after leaving 112 Ocean Avenue. On March the 7th, as dawn broke, the Warrens concluded that investigation at 112 Ocean Avenue, with the opinion that they felt the house could only be saved through a cleansing performed by an Anglican exorcist or a Roman Catholic priest. George and Kathy Lutz told the Warrens they were not willing to take on this responsibility. They'd be putting their lives in jeopardy. How can you go and ask someone to do that for a house? George later said. George and Kathy decided they couldn't risk moving their children back into the home. On August 30th, 1976, they returned the property to Columbia Savings and Loan, and on September 13th, 1977, Jay Anson's novel The Amityville Horror was published.
The claims made by the book and all involved have since been almost entirely debunked, and at best the book can be called a good work of fiction. In 1977, Jim and Barbara Cromartie bought the house for $55,000. During their time in the property, they filmed a television segment to put an end to the tabloid headlines that built their dream home as the most haunted property in America. Barbara argued that the home still retained all its original fixtures and fittings, so George's claims in the book of physical damage to the locks, doors and windows was simply ridiculous. Items had not been repaired, Barbara told the broadcast journalist. The segment also revealed that the Red Room has nothing more than a small closet in the basement, which would have been known to the Lutz immediately because it was not concealed in any way as claimed in the book. It was also promoted as an additional storage space when the Cromarties viewed the property. The photo taken in the house during the investigation that was supposedly John DeFeo, captured by John Campbell, a professional photographer, was also debunked. The photograph that emerged in 1979 when George and Kathy Lutz appeared on the Merv Griffin show to promote the release of the first film directed by Stuart Rosenberg turned out to be Paul Bart, who bore a striking resemblance to John. The ghostly glow that radiates from the eyes of Bart was also simply down to the infrared film. Bart later went on record and said of the photo, "The image in the photo does resemble me, and I now add and Lauren went on record stating it was a ghost. Because I have great respect and admiration for them, I will say no more on the issue, allowing the legend of the most haunted house in America to continue. The book's claims of cloven hoof prints in the snow on January the 1st, 1976 can also be discredited thanks to local weather reports that showed that there had been no snow in Amityville on that date.
It must also be noted that George also alleged in the book that a sergeant from the Amityville police investigated the cloven hoof prints, which George believed belonged to the pig. Not only was there no sergeant of his name on the Amityville police force, but there was no physical log with the Amityville police of George Lutz calling and reporting such an incident. Later, the book's publishers said that the authors are responsible for the content, adding that they published the book in good faith, which includes errors.
By the by, the Amityville horror book, which was incidentally billed as being based on a true story, was nothing more than a spellbinding bestseller that had become a profitable Hollywood formula that created a cottage industry of dozens of books and knockoff movies. Were there malevolent spirits? I struggle to believe there were. Do I believe George was the catalyst for the activity the children witnessed? Yes. And as for the Warrens, my belief is that they crafted a workable business model around their occult museum that allowed them to live a comfortable life and take advantage of the impressible victims along the way. Nevertheless, what I think isn't important, so I'll hand it over to Lisa.